You also have the freedom and flexibility to work when you like. So this is very important for some people. Earning potential is a massive one for some people. So as I mentioned before, when I opened that invoice that freelancer mistakenly sent me, I was blown away by the rates that they were charging for an equivalent quality of work as what I was delivering and getting paid for at an agency. You also need to make the most of your social media accounts. So Facebook, I don't think is very suitable for freelance medical writing. I don't think you're going to get many medcoms agencies on there, but LinkedIn is absolutely invaluable. Hi everybody, welcome to the Prospology presentation from Burnout to Balance. Is freelance medical writing for you? My name's Shaun Foley. Here's a picture of me. I'm based in the UK, Chester in the UK. I am a freelance medical writer. I have a BSc Honours in Biochemistry and Molecular Biology from the University of Leeds in England. No PhD for me. I know that's controversial in the medical writing realm, but there is method to my madness. Because when I was in university, I was much more interested in the health literacy side of things than the research side of things. So lab work was not for me. I much preferred literature reviews, articles, reading papers, all that sort of stuff rather than researching. When I finished my university course, I went straight into medical publishing. I worked for the open access publishers, Springer Healthcare and Biomed Central, both part of the massive Springer machine. So I was with those for about 2.5 years. And then I progressed into medical writing again with Springer Healthcare and then with another agency as well. I was at agency for about 5.5, 6 years. And then I made that transition into freelance medical writing, which I've done for the past 6 or 7 years. And aside from that, I'm also the founder of Biome Professionals, which is like a directory for freelancers and employees in medical communications. So there's several sections to today's presentation. First one is going to be a bit of an emotive tale where I talk about my story of when I was burnt out, working at a medical writing agency. I needed that transition into freelance medical writing. Then we have a couple of sections about the different benefits and risks of being your own boss as a freelancer. And then we have another section where we're talking about a bit of a roadmap, a bit of a pathway of how you'd actually make that transition into being a freelancer, because there's quite a few considerations that you need to do before you actually make that transition. So my story, so like I said before, this is a bit of an emotive sort of section where we're going to talk about my position. When I was at an agency, I was very burnt out and I made that transition into freelancing to try and get that better sort of work-life balance. So we need to go back to 2017. I was working at Springer. I just returned back to Springer after taking a year and a bit away to work for another agency that they'd asked me to come back. And I'd come back, obviously, for more money. Who doesn't move job for more money? But also because they made quite a lot of promises about sort of work I'd be doing, that there'd be line management and stuff. A lot of promises that I'd be doing specific things. And not long after I'd been there, I think it's about 6 months or so, there was a business need where they'd won some new work and they'd asked me to work on it. And it turned out just to be just impossible almost. There was so much work, there was so much stress. And I was really not happy with the situation. So I realized I needed to do something. I tried verbally to get off this work because it was affecting me, but it wasn't really having an effect. There was a business need for me to keep working on it. So I wanted to become a freelancer quite a long time at that point. I think it was a couple of years back before 2017 when I was a medical writer. A lowly medical writer, and I briefed some work out to a freelancer over the weekend, and they'd sent it back on the Monday, and they'd done a great job, done everything I'd asked for, but they'd also mistakenly sent the invoice back to me. And I remember curiously opening the invoice and just thinking, wow, I can't believe what they've charged for work, which is no better than my own. But, for like a day's work, it was like the equivalent of what I was earning in almost a week. So I thought this is something I want to do in the future, but admittedly at that moment in time, I didn't have the experience, and I definitely didn't have the resources or the contacts to make it work. So I sort of put a pin in it, and I thought this is something I'll do in the future. So then we moved forward to 2017, and I was in this quite high stress scenario. Thought this might be the time when I should consider being a freelancer. So I had to consider whether it was the right move to make. And you'll see on the right hand side of the slide, we have like a balance, some scales, and a lot of this presentation is about balance. Not only the balance of the situation, but also balancing the benefits and risks of being a freelancer. So on the left-hand side of this balance, you have the likes of when I was working at the agency. You'll see there's only one actually, but it was working for an agency that I did like. They gave me my first job at a university, medical publishing. They gave me my first medical writing job as well. I had family and friends who worked there and still work there now, so I do still have a soft spot for that agency. But if you look at the right-hand side of that scale, it's heavily tilted toward the dislikes because of that situation. There was too much work and stress. Like I mentioned before, it was just an impossible amount of work to do. I remember finishing one Friday and thinking I could literally work the whole weekend, come back on Monday, and it still wouldn't be done. So it was just way too much stress. Back in 2017 as well, I'd recently become a father with my wife for the first time. So there's a lot of emotions in the Foley household at the time, not a lot of sleep. There's a lot of stress, just with having a child. And adding to that stress was the stress at work as well. So admittedly, probably wasn't being the best father you could be because of this real burnout situation at work. There was not enough free time to exercise and relax. So for me, sort of exercising and relaxing are the same thing. Exercising is really important for my mental health. And I think my wife will be the first to say, like, if I don't exercise for a few days, I can be quite cranky. So there was no time to do that. And like I mentioned before, there was working on projects I just didn't want to work on. It's not something that I was used to. It's not something that I had previous experience at. I thought I wasn't doing a good job. So that scale was really tilting to the dislike side. So I felt like I had to make a transition to improve my work-life balance. So this section is about benefits of being a freelance medical writer and being your own boss. This is going to be a balanced presentation, like I mentioned. So this section is about the benefits. The next section will be about the risks. So the benefits of being your own boss, largely they are to do with the freedom and flexibility to work the way you want to work. So these are quite well documented anyway, just about freelancing or being your own boss in general. But I've tried to put a spin onto medical writing and medical communications here. But the first one is that I have freedom and flexibility to work on the projects you like. So as you read before, I was really working on projects I didn't want to work on when I was in that burnout situation. When you're a freelancer, you have more autonomy over your work and your workload. You can work when you want, however much you want, and also on what you want to do. So for me, that's your usual traditional medical communications projects like manuscripts, congress activities, literature reviews. So now that's kind of what I try to prioritize when I'm trying to find work as a freelancer. If someone does offer me somewhere, which I'm not really used to, I can say I can do it, but I don't have tons of experience on it. So I definitely prioritize working what I want to work on. You also have the freedom and flexibility to work when you like. So this is very important for some people. You can create your own schedule. Some people are night owls. They want to sleep all day. As long as your client accepts that you will do that and you will deliver the work when they want it, then you're free to do that. Some people that work on weekends or certain days so that they can align their working schedule with their partners. You have the freedom and flexibility to do that. You can also work where you like. You're not tied to one location. So for me, I like working in my office. I'm a creature of comforts. I have, my exercise bike. I have my, pictures on my wall. It's where I want to work. But some people might want to work abroad or co-work. I can remember an example of a freelancer that I used to work with, and she just used to tour Australia in a van. And when she got somewhere, she'd park up a van on a beach. if you do some medical writing as a freelancer, send the work, pack up away, and she'll be off to another beach again until her next gig. So you have that possibility as a freelancer, which is just almost impossible when you work for somebody else. And you also have the freedom and flexibility to work with the clients that you choose to. So we don't get on with everyone. I've been lucky that I've got on with most people that I work with when I was at agency, but there's been some where, there's just been clashes of personalities, or there's been clashes with the way we work, and we just haven't got on. So when you're working with somebody else and there's a business need for you to remain with that client, you're almost tied together and you can't get away. But as a freelancer, if you have a fussy client who you don't like working with, you just deliver that work in a nice professional manner and think, okay, I'll move on. And you have a choice that you don't need to work with. So you also have more control over certain aspects of your work. Earning potential is a massive one for some people. So as I mentioned before, when I opened that invoice that freelancer mistakenly sent me, I was blown away by the rates that they were charging for an equivalent quality of work as what I was delivering and getting paid for at an agency. So you're able to set your own rates. So you could either try to aim to work as much as what you're working at an agency and then considerably more. Your ceiling's a lot higher. Or you could choose to work considerably less because you're charging more per hour. You could bring home about the same amount of money. So you have that control. There's also work-life balance. So you have this greater flexibility to work when you want and to do stuff which you might not necessarily be able to do at night. So that's meet friends in the day, or travel, or exercise, or even do housework if you're boring like me. But I remember when I first started it, and I didn't have as much work on it. It was quite liberating just to go and meet friends in the day, or to to go and exercise, or go for a run in the sun in the summertime when you just don't have that option to do so when you're working for someone 9 to 5 in an office. You also have more control over your skill set. So when I was working at an agency, I had to do a bit of line management and reviewing of medical writing, but that's where it ended. There was no business need for me to learn any more skills, really. But when you're a freelancer and you're your own boss, you have to learn all these new skills. You need to know about the responsibilities of being a director, what you need to do to run a company, accountancy and taxes, all these things that you need to learn. And of course, you are your own IT support. So if your printer breaks down, it's up to you to fix it. Or if your laptop breaks, or if your laptop crashes and you need to open it up, or you need to find someone to fix it. You need all these qualities. So as I mentioned before, this will be a balanced presentation. I am very, very pro freelance, so I'm all for mentioning the benefits of being a freelancer, but there are risks as well. And these are very important risks. This page is mostly just all about finances. So as a freelancer, you won't have as many financial safety nets as you do when you're working for somebody else, particularly an agency. You'll have no employee benefits. And I've listed 4 here: health insurance, sick pay, maternity leave, and bonus. I think the most important, I'd say, are health insurance and sick pay. So as a freelancer, there's no greater leveler than not getting paid when it comes to being sick. I've worked in some right states of being sick, just because you have a tight deadline which you need to meet, and you might not have been engaged in any contracts for the past month, so you need to be paid. I remember being a right sick. I could hardly get out of bed, and it turned out that I had influenza A at the time, but my wife was away and I had the kids, so I had to just keep working and keep parenting and stuff. When if you work for an agency, you'd simply take a couple of days off sick and still get paid. There's also the factor of inconsistent income. So freelancing, being self-employed, is epitomised by feast or famine work. So sometimes you'll have so much work that you're just in a right state. You don't know how you're going to deliver it all. You might have to cancel social plans in the evenings or work weekends. because you have so much work that you need to deliver. But then the next month you might have nothing, and you're just completely worried about when the next gig is going to come in, where you're going to get work from. And of course, it's not just when you have work, but also when you deliver work. It's not always the case that you're going to get paid. This isn't so much a problem with larger clients. There's a lot of mitigation strategies where you could take them to court or something, but for smaller clients, if they don't pay you, sometimes they never have the intention of paying you. So you might actually deliver that work and just never get paid. It's just something that has to be accepted, unfortunately. There's taxes and accounting as well. So sometimes if you don't have any work for a month and then you finally get a project, you deliver it, you've been paid, and you see that invoice and your eyes light up. You have to consider that not all of that money is yours. You have to set some money aside for taxes. You have to set some money aside for expenses. You can't go spending it all. It's a key lesson to learn as a freelancer. You also need to purchase equipment as well. And we take this for granted, again, when we work for agencies, when you have all this wonderful new technology around you, which allows you to do your work. But when you actually go become a freelancer, you need to purchase this all. So, laptops aren't cheap nowadays. I think my one cost almost £2,000 and needs replacing every few years to make sure that it's up to date and nice and secure. But it's not just your laptops, you need keyboards, you need your mouse, printer software, pretty much everything which allows you to deliver that work. And of course, if it breaks, you need to go out and either get it repaired or buy some new equipment. So it can be quite expensive. There's also some struggles related with freelancing. A key ones are social aspects, including isolation. So I think this is particularly the case if you've come from a nice, lively, fast-paced, busy office or environment, and then you just go to working in your kitchen or your office by yourself. It can be quite lonely. Personally, I quite like it. I like having music on, the window open, no one disturbing me. Particularly when I'm writing manuscripts, you want to be in that sort of focused state of mind, and you don't want frequent disturbances disrupting your sort of your mental gears. But some people can feel quite lonely. I think particularly if you're a junior writer and you might need that brainstorming with other people. It can be quite intimidating and lonely. Fortunately, nowadays we have Teams and Zoom and stuff, but I can't imagine how difficult it must have been for freelancers, say 15 years ago, before the advent of this wonderful technology and webcams and stuff. It must have been so hard. You may struggle to deal with the fact that every client is a boss. So we have this wonderful vision of becoming a freelancer and then you are the boss and no one tells you what to do. But really, every client is your boss, and you have many, many bosses. Each new client is a new boss. An example here is that I think Monday night I was working till about 10 p.m., 11 p.m. to deliver some work. But Tuesday morning, I was working for another client, and they don't care that I was working till 10, 11 o'clock the night before. They want me at 9 a.m., bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, working on something completely different. So that's completely unrelated to the previous day. So it's sometimes hard to juggle that. When you work for agency, if you have a late night, your manager might say the next day, take the morning off. We're looking after you, take the morning off. You don't have a person to look after you except for yourself when you're a freelancer. Another struggle is accepting rejection. So rejection can come in many, many forms. When you're a freelancer, you can be rejected at an interview for a project that you might have hoped you're going to get. And I think it's quite soul destroying as well if you have a couple of rejections in a row and it's leading to you not having any money. It can be quite hard. But it's also a form of rejection when you deliver some work which you're quite happy with, but a client might not agree with its quality. And particularly if it leads to them not paying you, then it can be a bitter pill to swallow. But it's unfortunately something that we all have to learn to live with. as freelancers. And the last one here is sort of tied to that. It's ultimate responsibility. So you are the product as a freelancer, and everything is your responsibility. There's nowhere to hide if you make a mistake. If you work for a nice big agency or a nice big company and you make a mistake, you've often got a line manager or someone superior to you who can take a bit of the blame, put an arm around you, look after you. When you're by yourself as a freelancer, with your own business, everything is your fault. There's nowhere to hide. You just need to learn from your mistake and move on. We'll move on to planning ahead. So this section's about you've made that decision that you want to move from a burnout situation to more of a balanced life as a freelancer. And so here we provide a bit of a roadmap and strategy for how you actually make that transition. So there's a number of key considerations. We've listed 4 here. There's initial planning, there's financial planning, there's committing to your business, and then going ahead and growing your business. We're going to talk about each of those. So initial planning. Before you make that jump, because it is a big life transition, going from a paid environment where you've got guaranteed income to becoming a freelancer, you need a business plan. You need to refine your ideas. You might think you don't need one if it's just you by yourself, but you are the business, so you need a business plan. I mean, listing out all your objectives, your aims for the year, maybe what you expect to earn, how you can grow in the next year. This first one is just about refining your idea in terms of which area of medical writing you want to specialize in. So there's plenty of different specialties within medical writing. There's regulatory writing, there's traditional medical writing work like I do, so just your manuscripts, your congress activities. There's also charity work, there's medical education, there's medical information, loads of different specialties. So you need to try and focus on one so you can apply your trade in a specific area rather than maybe not doing as good a job as you could spread out over several different areas. You need to remember that you are the product. The freelancer is the product. A lot of people set up as limited companies where, you do have sort of limited liability, but really you are the product. So you need to make sure that you're always presenting yourself in a professional manner, and you need to know where and how to get work as well. So we've got a slide about that later on. We will go into more detail. Financial planning is probably the biggest consideration out of the 4. So I mentioned before, it's a risky business being a freelancer. There's no guaranteed income at all. So you need to know whether you have enough savings to support you. I think they recommend having about 3 to 6 months worth of savings at your current your salary at your current job, just to deal with that transitional period where you might not have any work for several months. If we look at my situation, it was probably the worst situation you can imagine when I transitioned to freelancing. So we just had my son. My wife was on maternity leave and getting maternity pay, so she was hardly getting any money. We just moved house, so we had no savings. It could have gone horribly, but fortunately, it went well. But I would not advise that anyone did it in a similar situation that I did in. You need to know how much money you will need to bring in each month. So a good way to work this out is to work out all your outgoings per month, and then think, okay, then you come up with this final value and you think, I need to work X amount of hours at Y dollars or pounds per hour just to cover those outgoings. And then you need to try and earn a bit more than that, so you've actually got some savings as well. And as I mentioned before, there's definite startup costs, because without all of this equipment here that I've listed, you're not even able to deliver the work. So as I mentioned before, computer, laptop, monitor, mouse, keyboard, printer, desks, chairs, it all adds up. And I think that's why you also need those savings to begin with, because without all this technology, you're not even able to do your job. I've listed insurance at the bottom. I'm not sure whether this is the same case in America, but over in England, particularly, a lot of clients won't even engage with you unless you have professional indemnity insurance, just so that they are covered and also you are covered as well. So, but that is quite expensive, particularly if you've paid for all this other tech as well listed there. And also health insurance as well. I know it's quite standard over in the US, but here in England as well, with the national health services going to ruins, it's quite important to have. So you've made that decision where you're going to make the transition. You now need to commit to your business. So you've thought about your business model that we said at the first, a couple of slides back, your business plan. You've worked out that you want to specialize in a certain area, that you're going to contact XYZ clients. So you need to think of a nice snazzy name for your company and register it. A lot of people in England just often use the actual name. So they just call it, for example, Shaun Foley Medical Writing. It's quite common over in England, but it needs to be registered and it needs to be a name which hasn't been used before. You need to open a bank account as well with that company's name. You need to consider whether you want an accountant. I am very pro accountants. I love my accountants. I would highly recommend getting one. And then you need to launch. And there's a couple of different tactics for launching. You can either launch as a hard launch, where you announce that you're going to be a medical writer shortly before you launch your business, just so people are aware that you actually are launching. Or you can do a soft launch where you just quietly launch your business and don't really announce it beforehand. I'd highly recommend a hard launch, just because maybe that month or so where you let people know that you're going to be a medical writer, that could be the difference between actually getting your first gig like as soon as you launch, or compared with waiting maybe a couple of months after you've launched to get that gig. And then you need to go ahead and get some business. Okay, so the final one, growing your business. And I put maximum effort here because I can't emphasize enough sort of how hard it is to be a freelancer during that first period where you just made that transition. Everything's new. You have a load of new skills to learn. Everything's scary. Getting work scary. When you've actually got the work, it's scary. Sending that first invoice is scary. But it's quite important to establish yourself quite early on and try to get a couple of good clients. So you need to put maximum effort in. If you work those couple of extra evenings and or those couple of extra weekends at first, just to establish that relationship, it'll really pay dividends in the future. You need to know where and how you will find work. And as I mentioned before, there'll be a slide on that next. You need to set your price and stick to it. So in the UK, I think the average price for a medical or freelance medical writer, it's about £50 to £90 an hour. In the US, I think it's maybe about $100, but I did a bit of research and there's a wide variation. It can even go up to like $200 an hour. But it's important that we do not undervalue ourselves and other freelancers. So I believe it was JFK who said a rising tide lifts all boats. And that applies here because if everyone's undercutting themselves and undercutting each other, all it's going to do is undervalue ourselves. And it's going to turn into a vicious cycle that everyone's getting paid less and less and less for delivering high quality work. So in an ideal scenario, each year everyone's gradually increasing their prices in line with inflation and not undercutting themselves. It just damages the whole industry. I mentioned before about maximum effort, but you also need to be prepared to turn down work. So while at first you might want to put maximum effort in to try and get all these established relationships and deliver this work and get a name for yourself, once you're established, you want to be turning down work. You don't want to be in another scenario where you're burnt out, which might have been the whole reason why you've moved into being a freelancer. And also you don't want to be delivering substandard work because you've taken on too much. It can happen to us all, but I think it's much better to either approach the client and say, I can't deliver this to a standard that I want to at this timeline. Is it okay whether I do it next week or this weekend, or even find a substitute who can do the work for you and you can still provide maybe like some reviewing time to make sure it's up to the standard that you'd want it to be delivered to. So there's also some practical tips to growing your business, and here we've listed some places where you actually might find some freelance work. So I can't emphasize enough just how good a cold email can be to a company. Just contacting them out of the blue. The worst thing that can happen is that they just say, "We've got no work for you, sorry," or you don't get a reply. The best thing that can happen is that they say, "Yes, we've got some work, here it is," or somewhere in the middle where they say, "We don't have any work for you now, but maybe next month." Just getting your name known with a company can really help just through a simple cold email. You can also search for opportunities just online. The amount of times I've just Googled freelance medical writing job and something's come up. Let Google do the hard work for you. You can really find a lot of positions just through Google. There's also a lot of freelance job sites. So some of them are non-specific to medcoms, like Fiverr, Upwork, for example. They still have medical writing positions on there. Then you have more specific to medcoms job sites like Professionals, which I run. There's one called Talus as well, which is very similar to Upwork and Fiverr, but it's more specific to medical writing. So there's several of those that you can get work from. You can ask clients for testimonials and just gather word of mouth recommendations. So my first two clients was purely through this way. One of them was a friend who I used to work with at my agency. They moved on to another agency and said when they found out that I was going to be a freelancer that they gave me some work. And my other client, when I first started, was just someone that I played football with. He also was quite high up at another medical communications agency, and I just mentioned that I was going freelance, and word of mouth sort of got round, and both of those clients have now moved on from that original company that I supported, but just from word of mouth, I still work with them occasionally, those original companies. It's a good idea to build an impressive website. And I highly recommend doing this at the start if you don't have much work on, just using that time proactively to build an impressive website. A lot of times, a potential client, the first thing they'll do is just Google you just to see whether you're a real person or not, or you're based where you say you are. So it's a good example. It's a good way to to validate who you are if you have a nice, impressive website. In particular, if you can put examples of your work on there. You also need to make the most of your social media accounts. So Facebook, I don't think is very suitable for freelance medical writing. I don't think you're going to get many medcoms agencies on there. But LinkedIn is absolutely invaluable, particularly if you've grown a nice, strong network full of medical communicators as well. If you're posting actively on that, saying when you're not busy, I need some work, saying when you are busy, just so people know that you've always got work on, it sort of builds a bit of excitement for when you are free. Or just posting examples of your work, it really, really helps with generating leads that potentially lead to work. So thankfully now it's 2024 and we can talk about our mental health. I think medcoms nowadays is extremely busy, extremely competitive, extremely fast-paced as well. So when you add on the stresses of being a freelancer, it can really affect your mental health. There's a wonderful organisation in the UK called the Association of Independent Professionals and the Self-Employed. It's shortened to IPSI, but they provide a lot of really beautifully written information just helping freelancers. If you pay them each year as well, they'll provide you with loads of additional services, so including reviewing your contracts to make sure that you're covered from a legal perspective. I think they even cover sick pay as well if nobody else is going to pay you. And I think when COVID started as well, they would help to support you if you were affected by COVID as well by giving you some money. So they are really good. But a few years back, they did a survey amongst the self-employed. And they found out that there's both positive and negative effects on people's mental health of being self-employed. On the left, you can see that they found that 80% of freelancers felt that moving to self-employment had a somewhat positive impact on their mental health. And I think that's probably related to the better work-life balance, being able to work when and where and however much you want to, and maybe even the extra money as well for people who are busy. But there was also negative effects of being a freelancer. Anxiety and depression are the most commonly diagnosed mental illnesses in the creative sector. And I think they're probably related to people maybe not having enough work, or being worried about money. And also 1 in 10 freelancers never took time off, which I find terrifying because I'm always trying to take time off. But 1 in 10 people must have been working all weekends, all evenings. And again, it's just reverting back to a burnout situation, which they probably left to become a freelancer. So we've talked about the benefits and risks of freelancing. And then if you were convinced to do it, I know it's a different crowd today than when we had quite a few potential freelancers when I last did this presentation. But if I had convinced you to become a freelancer, then we've also covered the initial planning and financial planning aspects. Some key considerations you need to think about before you make that transition. And then we've also provided a nice roadmap for how you smoothly make that transition. So does anybody have any questions? Happy to answer anything.
I have just a question for you. Since you're in the UK, do you work like all over the place, and how do you manage that? With timelines and deadlines, and I'm assuming you work on projects in the US as well.
I've worked with, I think, 1 US client before. Mostly it's UK based. I think a lot of medical communications is weirdly in the UK and then Germany and Switzerland. So, and then the US as well. So I have worked with the US client before, but thankfully we have an overlap like we have today, where, I'll be working sort of late afternoon, they'll be working in the morning. I think the whole point of being a freelancer is that you have that experience and skills, so that you only need like a little bit of an overlap or a handover. And then the idea is that you have the experience that you can go and work by yourself. But I think if you're probably new to being a freelancer, it might be tricky unless you're prepared to work with a different time zone. It might be quite tricky. Anybody else? No problem. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, thank you. That was interesting. I wasn't sure how you arranged all of that work.
I don't mind. I think it's easy if you haven't got kids as well. But I don't mind once the kids are in bed, sort of hopping on and working at a different time zone. I don't think I could do it long term, but thankfully, by definition, a lot of freelance projects are quite short term anyway. Maybe months at most. So I think if you're willing to do it, and maybe it's a client which could be a long-term established client, and they might be willing to be flexible with time zones in the future, then it's probably worth doing. Any other questions for anyone? I have a question for you guys. Do you have many sort of students asking about freelance medical writing? And if so, sort of what resources do you point them to normally?
I'll start. We do have some students that have interest, and mostly I think they're initially just interested in how to complete publications or presentations, to boost their CV and to get them to the next level, the next residency or that sort of thing. But sometimes you'll have students that have a particular interest in writing. And honestly, we have several faculty that have certain experience in certain areas of writing. I think research writing, Leanne, who's on this call, has a lot of good experience. I have tossed some students her direction. And then we have some good resources within our university through our libraries as well. I think a lot of us are interested in this topic and how do we help our students. So this course has been interesting from that perspective, as well as, what you were saying earlier too.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the students that I have, and I just figured out there's a difference between medical writing and scientific writing. And I think they're interested in scientific writing, and that would be like what Heather said, a publication. If they're writing up a review article or a case report. I found Coursera has free online courses, and there's one called Writing for the Sciences that I have students complete if they're going to do writing with me. It's very much focused on scientific writing and not medical writing, but some of the principles kind of overlap.
I think so, yeah. I think it would be a different end client who you'd have in terms of, it wouldn't be like a medical communications agency, but it might be, I don't know, like a publisher or like a hospital or an organization or something like that, or maybe even like someone who's developing some sort of scientific device or something. But I agree, most of these principles will overlap.
Yeah, and I think a lot of pharmaceutical companies have what they call ghostwriters, so that you are doing the scientific writing.
Medical writing.
Yeah, you're doing the scientific writing, not medical writing, but scientific writing.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think pharmacists would be set up to do that.
Yeah. There was a massive scandal years ago in medical writing where I think it was discovered, I think it was AstraZeneca, were found to be using ghostwriters, medical writers who just weren't being acknowledged that they'd actually done all the work. So we have a lot of sort of publications in place now, a lot of sort of ethical resources that you need to follow to write ethically and to publish ethically. So we're not allowed to use ghostwriting anymore. I'm not sure what it's like.
It's gotten more stringent here too, in terms of what's considered as authorship. But I still feel like some of the pharmaceutical companies kind of push the limits on that, where they have nationally, internationally known physicians who end up being the first author on the paper. But I'm not sure they wrote the paper. They were involved in the research. They may have been the principal investigator on the research, but I seriously doubt they wrote the paper. They probably reviewed it.
Yes. But so we have something called the ICMJE, International Committee for Medical Journal Editors, and they provide sort of different recommendations, which sort of explains whether you qualify as an author or not. So you don't actually have to write the paper, but you do need to be involved in sort of the study or the study design or performing the study or capturing data or sort of getting sponsorship or like admin for the study. But then you don't need to write the paper, but you do need to be involved with reviewing it and editing it for scientific quality, intellectual sort of quality. And you also need to take responsibility for the data in the paper as well, but you don't actually have to write it. That's what us medical writers often are involved with doing. The authors often just contribute intellectually to editing it and making it better. But good knowledge, though. Any more questions before we move to the final slide? No? Okay. So just to summarize then, before you consider actually transitioning to be a freelance medical writer, you need to weigh up the benefits and risks. There's plenty of benefits and there's plenty of risks. So you need to consider your personal situation and the reasons why you want to do it. You'll have the freedom and flexibility and a lot more control if you do it, but you'll also have a lot fewer financial safety nets. And some people struggle with the social aspect and the increased responsibility of being a director and a business owner. But if you do want to do it, then you need to plan carefully and then go all in with your business. Think carefully about the operations and the financial considerations. and then commit and take action and grow. And most importantly, take care of yourself along the way. And that's it. Thank you for having me.